Welcome to a behind-the-scenes VIP visit to the world's most famous zoo, the San Diego Zoo.
The San Diego Zoo, the world-famous wildlife haven bursting with vibrant life. Nestled in the Balboa Park, this sprawling 100-acre zoo is home to thousands of rare and endangered creatures from across the globe. Pulling in millions of visitors every year, each exhibit offers an up-close glimpse into the wonders of the animal kingdom. With its lush tropical landscapes and immersive habitats, the San Diego Zoo really is a full-on adventure.
Cool.
Well, on the 13th of February 1971, San Diego Zoo welcomed a new addition. An orangutan was born. The son of the zoo's Maggie and Bob, it was decided he would be named Ken Allen, after the two zookeepers that would go on to care for him in his early years, Ken Willingham and Ben Allen. And this ape's time at San Diego Zoo would go on to be nothing shy of remarkable. So, after his birth, young Ken Allen didn't have the greatest start in life. It appeared that his mother was sadly failing to properly care for him, nearly accidentally smothering him. So, the team at San Diego Zoo felt it was best for Ken's safety to separate him from his mother and place him in his own cage. Well, as a young adolescent, Ken seemed to quickly acclimatise to his enclosure and loved the company of his zookeepers and other humans alike. A very sociable, intelligent young ape. And like all young playful apes, Ken was quite the troublemaker. But it was at nightfall when Ken would really shoot into action. One night, as the San Diego Zoo closed its doors and Ken's keepers were heading home after a long day's work, it seemed that Ken didn't particularly like the idea of being left confined to his small metal prison. Well, Ken had learned to unscrew the bolts of his cage to free himself, and once out, he'd just roam around his nursery. So the next morning, as staff arrived, there they found Ken playing with his toys as his cage sat dismantled behind him. Assuming there'd just been some sort of structural error with the cage framework, the zookeeper simply put it back together again, and as night drew in, they led Ken back into the newly assembled cage. Well, Ken had made a note of this. So that night, as their shift ended and the zookeepers left, once again, Ken started to unscrew the bolts of his cage and simply messed about. He loved the freedom, but this time was different. Ken had learned that the morning was when the zookeepers would start their shifts and return, and he wasn't going to be caught out again. So after yet another night of freedom, as the sunlight slowly crept in through the window of his nursery, this time around, Ken climbed back into his cage and started re-securing the bolts as if nothing had happened. This way, when the keepers entered the nursery that morning, there they saw Ken sat well behaved in his cage as if he'd been there the entire night. Well, Ken's master plan would go on for a few nights. He would unscrew the cage, play in the nursery, return to the cage, and then reassemble it. Everything was going swimmingly. But there was one small thing that Ken didn't account for. Eventually, the zookeeper started to notice that when they'd return in the morning, whilst Ken was sat content in his cage, his toys weren't in the places that the staff had left them the night before. So, with a hunch, that night, the keepers said their goodbyes to Ken and they pretended to leave. But rather than heading home, they sat quietly outside of Ken's nursery and waited. And after a while, as they expected, they started to hear noises. So they abruptly burst through the door, and there they saw Ken, cage dismantled, playing with his toys. So the jig was up. Ken was placed into a new, much sturdier cage, and that put a stop to his late night antics once and for all. But trust me when I say, this was merely the beginning when it came to Ken Allen. Things for San Diego Zoo would get far, far worse. Oh, there we go. For Ken to be forward a few years, and the zookeepers felt it was finally time for Ken to be shown off to the public. And he was placed into the Heart of the Zoo exhibit that had opened just 3 years prior. But when Ken first moved in, he wasted no time in turning his hand to mischief. When a film crew turned up to document the gorilla enclosure next door, Ken decided it'd be a good idea to hurl rocks at them. And then when he ran out of rocks, he used his own shit. And keepers would also report seeing Ken fashioning branches into DIY ladders that he would then thump into the ground with his own fist, climb up to the top, and then climb all the way back down. Now it's important to note that Ken wasn't alone in this enclosure. Keepers decided that maybe it was best that he had some company this time around, so they placed him in an enclosure with a bunch of other orangutans. So there was a number of female orangutans, Ken, and one other male named Otis. Now, if you know the first thing about the animal kingdom, 2 males and a bunch of females doesn't usually end too well. To put it bluntly, Ken grew to despise Otis. I'm talking cold-blooded hatred, resulting in numerous feuds. So the zookeeper's idea of giving Ken some company had seemingly backfired. So they cut their losses and moved Ken into his own enclosure. So there he was, alone once again. Now let's have a think, shall we? Last time Ken was alone, what did he do? That's right, baby. He started planning his next escape. So on the 13th of June 1985, a 14-year-old Ken Allen managed to climb up the wall of his enclosure and got out. Now, what exactly did Ken do after his valiant escape? Well, he very confidently just strolled around the zoo amongst visitors, minding his own business, observing the other animals. Oh, look at the elephants. Wow, look at that giraffe. He wasn't aggressive or agitated. In fact, Ken loved the attention. Well, this escapade went on until the zookeepers were made aware of Ken's escape. Now, they knew that if Ken was to attack anybody, they would be forced to put him down.
Because of his strength, because he is a wild animal, the potential is there to do harm, to hurt somebody badly.
So slightly panicked, they hesitantly approached Ken, but he caused no trouble at all, and then they quickly led him back to his enclosure, which he happily complied with. Now, whilst Ken Allen was chilled, enjoying his day spent roaming the zoo, the same couldn't be said for the zoo's staff. They were having a meltdown. They knew if news of Ken Allen's escape went public, they would have a PR disaster on their hands. But of course, they had no control over the news leaking. I mean, there was an orangutan walking amongst members of the public. That does turn heads. So as the news broke, the staff at the San Diego Zoo prepared for the worst. But rather than the expected PR disaster, Ken Allen became somewhat of a local hero, and it actually worked in the zoo's favour. With everyone reading the news about Ken, people just had to see for themselves, and the zoo attendance skyrocketed. Well, despite the media buzz, behind the scenes, San Diego Zoo were doing all they could to prevent another escape. Sure, the attention was great, but one instance of an escaped ape was enough for them. Zoo officials decided they needed to step up security of Ken's pen, so they installed a moat around the perimeter of his enclosure and installed a 250-foot wall. This was bound to stop Ken in his tracks, and thankfully, it worked. Crisis averted. The security measures successfully contained Ken Allen. For all of a few weeks, that is. Because on the 29th of July, 1985, Ken managed to escape again. He somehow made his way over the moat, and just like his last escape, the 250-pound orangutan effortlessly scaled his enclosure wall. And yet again, he did the same, just casually strolling around the zoo amongst visitors, even posing for selfies. But this time, there was one more thing Ken wanted to do on his day trip. So as the zookeepers were once again made aware of Ken's escape, they frantically ran out to the zoo for a second time to capture Ken. And there they found him, stood over an enclosure. But this time, he wasn't looking at the pretty elephants. There Ken was, picking up rocks and pelting them at none other than Otis, Ken's ex-roommate and sworn enemy.
Holy!
This escape had only escalated the media hype around Ken. The already packed San Diego Zoo had more and more visitors
Grind set,
all
dude.
eager to see Ken Allen.
Fucking hater.
Could not
Hater grind set.
But yet again, as for the staff at San Diego Zoo, whilst thankful for the increase in ticket sales, they simply could not let this happen again. 2 escapes was already far too many. Things were really getting silly now. Every effort the zookeepers had applied to try and halt Ken's escapes was failing. They needed to really step things up this time around. So for the time being, they moved Ken into an indoor pen that reportedly had a black and white television that featured just one channel. So as Ken sat and watched TV, the staff started to draft a plan to further beef up Ken's main enclosure and increase security, fortify the place properly. So as the staff gathered around and started pitching ideas, meanwhile, outside of zoo grounds, after the media had caught wind of the second escape, things had gotten bonkers. Ken Allen had become somewhat of an icon. Free Ken Allen t-shirts started popping up all over the place, $14 a pop. Bumper stickers appearing on cars all over San Diego. A group of pensioners formed a Ken Allen fan club aptly named the Orang Gang, complete with a monthly newsletter. And maybe the strangest outcome of Ken's fame, a San Diego-based psychiatrist named Dennis Gersten released a single, The Ballad of Ken Allen. Harder than Yeah, shit
The
was
fuck?
getting weird. Headlines started referring to Ken Allen as Hairy Houdini, a name that fit him perfectly. So back at the zoo, with all eyes on them, the staff started their efforts to beef up Ken's main enclosure once and for all. So with the master plan finished, they started by surrounding the wall with a powerful electric fence. Then they hired a pair of professional rock climbers to try and scale the enclosure wall so staff could seek out the foot and handholds and patch over them, making a chance of a route to the top virtually impossible.
Making the walls smoother, straight up and down,
Why not just
taking all
do
the little
concrete?
bumps and ridges out of the wall
Isn't
that
that
you
just
could possibly
an
get a
easy
handhold
fix?
on.
Also, the keepers had noted that Ken would only really ever attempt to escape when he was in an enclosure alone. And of course, when they attempted to put him in an enclosure with other orangutans, the only real issue was the fact that there was another male, Otis. So, zookeepers decided that the best course of action
Why
would
just
be
swap
to
them,
introduce some female orangutans into the upgraded enclosure, and no other males, in the hopes that the company might calm him down. So with the big security renovations finally complete, they decided it was time to free Ken from his indoor prison. He'd watched enough black and white TV, and they released him into the newly upgraded enclosure. But that wasn't all the staff had up their sleeve. This time, they decided it was best that they monitored Ken, see what he got up to, learn his habits, see if he was acting fishy. But this is Ken Allen we're talking about. This is one smart orangutan. He knew that when he saw humans dressed in zoo uniform, he couldn't act out or pull any wise moves, as he knew they were watching. But this time, the staff were one step ahead of Ken. So to get round this, they would disguise themselves in normal, casual clothing, blue jeans, Hawaiian shirts, sunglasses, as if they were just regular old bystanders visiting the zoo. That way, they could watch Ken and he'd have no idea they were members of staff.
Seems good.
A tactic that the zoo coined guerrilla tactics. Okay, 1 gold star for that one, San Diego Zoo. I'll give it to you. So how did it all go?
Sure.
Well, their plan worked. Ken didn't try to escape. So there Ken was, busy not escaping, relaxing, sitting around. Oh, he has a crowbar. It seemed that Ken had discovered the tool when it had been seemingly left behind by a construction worker. Not particularly wanting to approach a crowbar-wielding orangutan, the zookeepers watched over helplessly. But to their relief, Ken threw it aside, landing at the feet of fellow orangutan, Vicky. Now, knowing she was far calmer than Ken, the keepers weren't too worried about her, until that is, they heard a large crunch and Vicky had used the crowbar to try and pry open the glass of the enclosure window in an attempt to free herself and Ken. That's right, Ken had seemingly upped his intelligence level and was training other orangutans to aid him in his escapes.
Pretty clever, as if they learned from the master himself.
There must be some kind of orangutan communication going on here.
Thankfully, for zoo staff, this time around, they caught Ken and Vicky almost instantly before they made it out to the public and then re-secured the window. So after making sure all the loose tools were secure and feeding the construction worker to the alligators, it seemed that Ken, for the most part, was behaving himself. They did catch him one time, managing to scale the wall, despite the rock climber's best efforts.
Wait,
but when he eventually
whoa.
reached the electric fence, he lightly brushed it, got quite the zap, and quickly made his way back down. The San Diego Zoo had outdone themselves. Finally, all the work the staff had put in had seemingly
make it
worked
smoother?
to keep Ken Allen at bay. Ken started to settle down.
Hey,
and
just-
the media
just
started
pour
to feel that he'd
concrete,
become
man.
somewhat of a family man, and it looked as if his escapes had finally been put to rest. But it seemed that Ken was simply buying his time, because 2 years later, the pump that fueled the moat around Ken's enclosure had conveniently clogged, drying up the moat completely, and this allowed for a clear and easy path to the wall. Ken then sat patiently and waited for the moment that the power to the electric fence was shut off for maintenance. How he knew this is still a mystery, but with the timing being perfect, he capitalised, making a bolt for it. And once again, after his 2-year hiatus, he'd come out of retirement, and it was like he'd never stopped. Back to his old ways, he strolled around the zoo, taking photo after photo, everybody raving that they had seen Ken Allen, Hairy Houdini, the ape that could not be contained. But this time around, when he saw the guards approaching in the distance, Ken wasn't as calm as he was during his other escapes. He made a bolt for the lion enclosure, dodging and weaving, making the most of his freedom, crowds cheering as he sprinted. He was really pushing the boat out this time. This was the furthest away Ken had ever been from his enclosure. Fearing that Ken was going to climb into the lion enclosure and be their next meal, staff were hot on his heels, and after 3 long hours, he was eventually cornered by gun-wielding zookeepers and led back to his enclosure. Luckily, the zookeepers knew that the only reason the escape was possible was due to the moat drying up and the power shutting off, and once repaired, the fortifications that had worked for 2 years would still be up to scratch. But while secure, what the keepers had underestimated once more was the fact that Ken had roommates. Things have been going great, but we all know how things go when you surround Ken with female orangutans. Ken isn't exactly the best influence on the ladies, but it wasn't Ken this time. One day before the zoo opening time, Jane and Kumang had found a 5-foot long handled squeegee that a cleaner had accidentally left in the enclosure, and inspired by Ken, the two somehow used it to climb up the wall and hop out. Jane apparently wandered into an employee-only lounge area, finished off some of their sodas, and was found roaming around near the flamingos, where she had to be tranquilised and returned to her enclosure. And thankfully, Kumang willingly returned. But while she was the tamer ape this time around, it seems that Kumang wanted her own chapter in the adventure book. She managed to escape 2 additional times by shortening the electric fence wires with a twig. The first time, she was found sat playing in a garden bed where she was tranquilised. Then the second time, she was sat outside the monkey enclosure, and when approached by staff, she climbed on top of the bird sanctuary where she was tranquilised again. In fact, Kumang's mischief actually got the group put in solitary confinement once more, whilst the keepers made the wiring system more complex, upgraded the doors, and went around with an electromagnet to make sure there was nothing they could use to aid an escape. So even though Ken was in retirement, he was still seemingly costing the zoo money through his students. At this point, the zoo had reportedly spent a whopping $45,000 on security over the course of the escapes. As for Ken himself, as years passed, it seems that the escapes at San Diego Zoo really had finally come to an end this time. Ken was living a simpler life in his enclosure, sat relaxing, eating, and flipping off children that walked by. Ken settled down for years to come. He had finally decided to behave himself and stayed put in his enclosure. He had truly given up on his old ways. Well, in the winter of 2000, the zookeepers noticed that Ken was acting out of the ordinary. He was moving erratically and seemed uncomfortable, so the staff sent him in for a visit with the zoo doctor. Ken was diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma, a form of blood cancer. Now, at first, doctors weren't too worried, as Ken was still young and fit and would most likely be able to fight off the disease. But sadly, as time went on, Ken's condition deteriorated and the cancer had become more aggressive. The cancer that was now terminal. So the zookeepers decided that rather than letting Ken suffer at the age of 29, on December 1st, 2000, Ken Allen was euthanized.
Options for chemotherapy were explored, but at this time, the therapy was mainly geared towards making Kenny as comfortable as possible.
His condition had worsened over the last several days. Ken brought great joy to the San Diego Zoo for over 29 years. The loss of this type of animal is a great loss to our organization. This is a sad day at the San Diego Zoo. At 11:05 today, Ken Allen was put down.
The Orangang published a 2-page spread as a tribute to Ken and hosted a candlelit vigil for him, stating he would have done the same for us. To this day, a plaque sits in San Diego Zoo in Ken Allen's honour. So there you go. The story of Ken Allen's numerous escapes from the San Diego Zoo. $45,000, t-shirts, bumper stickers, a fan club, a single, and a hell of a tale.
That was nice.
I've made sure to link to the main sources that help to tell this story below, if you want to...
Okay, some daily dose.
This is your daily dose. Dose of internet. She tried to give herself fake freckles with a special spray.
I wanted freckles, but I know you're supposed to press it lightly, and that's what I did, and it wasn't working. So I just closed my eyes and went for that, and now my makeup's absolutely ruined. I even practiced on my arm, and it wasn't working.
He tried to close the garage and jump over the garage laser at the same time.
It'll work.
Oh, classic.
Classic.
Watch your head.
Oh, I can't believe
that is not ideal.
Don't laugh.
Alright, what do you want?
Can I get a bunch of fries and a McFlurry?
Can I touch a bunch of guys who are furries? Oh, gee. Good one, dude.
She wanted to celebrate her first day of kindergarten.
Dude, it fucking glitters on the
This guy
ground.
took off a
Really
shoe
now.
and put it in the middle of the floor at an art gallery.
You're never getting this shit out.
You got your clutch, you got your brake, you got your throttle, you got your gear lever, AFR gauge, fan switch, steering wheel. You got all that?
Raccoons are absolutely ruthless.
31 months of React.
What?
"40 months feels Rain Man."
What the fuck? I might have rabies. Kick it. Jesus.
Putting a push sign on a pole door is the most evil thing you'll see
Extreme
today.
when.
Jeez, man. All the aura lost there is kind of crazy.
This poor cat can't figure out how to get around this tape.
I mean, he's retarded. Jesus, man. Chills, yeah.
Alright, so I just got this new bidet right here. All you gotta do is turn this knob.
This bear got angry because it didn't know how to use a hammock.
Ugh. You know somebody's shitting in there. Right, somebody touched ass with the... Yeah, nice.
One of my
Real.
subscribers lives in Texas
Real.
and recorded this video showing how the tires on their car started to melt.
Not scripted at all.
Wait, what?
This artist can create some incredible 3D art.
Is that Venice?
Can it be that hot that it can melt rubber?
So I guess
Wait,
bears
what?
are scared of Trump. So I guess bears are scared of trumpets.
It's like some squares and angles. Good.
These people have a chicken that popped out and...
What?
These
That's
people have a chicken that
insane.
popped out an absolutely massive egg.
It's a toy? Oh, pfft. Garbage.
These people have a chicken that popped out an absolutely
Oh, that
massive
ruined it,
egg.
man. That ruined it.
Okay, look, normal cow.
Oh, that's a cute
Cow.
cow.
Cow, right? Ready? Weird cow. What are you doing?
I just feel so discombobulated right now. Thank God.
This contortionist wanted to see if he could recreate this statue.
What?
I found a really surprised turtle. This
Cool,
chimp
nice turtle.
reunited with his old caretakers that he hasn't seen in over a decade.
Aww. That's kind of cute, I guess.
This little guy pulled off the best shot of all time.
Okay. Hank, you go down there by Wobble and try.
xQcl, hope everyone is doing well.
I've been saying it. Trick shot then.
That looks kind of cool.
This guy dove into the water to escape from the police.
Upstairs? Yeah, but we need to get the agent.
Let's go, together. Together. Let's go. Oh,
This staircase can transform into an elevator.
Jesus.
That seems like a waste of time.
Or just a ramp for like 1/1,000,000th of the price, but
And the time.
that's disgusting.
This is what happens when you cut through a piece of wood 150 times.
I don't watch you as much nowadays as I used to, but I always pop by whenever I can.
That's
Got a girlfriend. Moved in together. Things will get better, chat.
So this is pretty cool.
Mr. Cow,
Lemon juice can
love
be
you,
used
chat.
to remove
And I have
highlights.
$1 billion.
-1 round.
One of my subscribers recorded a video of these monkeys terrorizing a restaurant.
Yeah, fucking small monkeys, dude. It's always small monkeys that are aggressive,
Well, it wasn't a flex, it was...
steal
oh,
shit,
God, it's chat.
they harm people. I hate small fucking
Good job, bro.
monkeys,
Late night.
man.
You're doing... Wait, what?
This elephant loves to play the drums. The student returned to school from summer break and found this in his toilet.
他妈的厕所长了个什么东西啊！我操！真是太牛逼啊！我靠！
It's like some Middle East toilet.
That's fucking disgusting, dude.
This guy was seen
33
playing some
months
straight
Giga
fire
Chat
music.
subscriber. Can you welcome me to the jungle at last, please, Felix?
This dragonfly keeps coming back.
Your pet?
That's cool.
Fruit picking robots are getting better and better.
You know you can just hire some slave for that. You know?
This person was spotted making a brick oven pizza.
You
on
don't
the
need to
road.
buy a robot for $500,000. You can just hire some guy like
That is the end of this video. We hope you
like
enjoyed.
borderline slavery,
I will see you guys
under
again
the ground,
very, very
under
soon.
the radar, right? Illegal.
I thought you guys were against the robotization.
Illegal
And lots of
workers.
jobs.
You can just hire them for like $1 an hour. You don't need to buy a robot for $500,000. It's a waste of time and money. There's plenty of people that want to do that shit, right? Right? Also, there's some. I have another video for you. Right?
Why Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are teaming up? Because they're neighbors?
Let this one last because it's politics.
This missile struck Kharkiv, Ukraine on January 2nd, 2024. And immediately, something seemed off. It didn't look Russian. It was one of hundreds Russia fired over a 5-day span in its largest air attack since invading. But when experts in the US government took a closer look, they found it eerily matched photos of missiles made in North Korea. Russia had also fired dozens of these drones, which are made in Iran. And cruise missiles like these with wiring and turbojet engines from China.
Okay.
The appearance of these weapons in Ukraine isn't an accident. They're a key way these four countries are working together. And they're growing close enough that some in the US are beginning to call them an axis. That's Axis like the Axis powers, who fought the US and its allies in the Second World War. And the axis of evil that US President George W. Bush, well, made up.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
But I've been seeing this new axis described in a lot of different ways. There's the new axis of evil, the axis of rogues, of evasion, even of outcasts.
I think the name that best describes this groups of countries is the axis of upheaval. It's the big geopolitical shift that we've seen over the last several years.
So why is an autocratic mafia state, an Islamic theocracy, a communist superpower, and a reclusive socialist state teaming up? And how much danger do they pose to the rest of the world?
Good. Do you know they use R there? They use is. Bad grammar. I mean, that's right, just bad grammar because it is for. It's a multiple.
The governments of China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea are very different states, but they do have a couple things in common. First, they're all trying to build their own spheres of influence. 1, 2, 3. When Russia was part of the Soviet Union, it controlled much of Eastern Europe and Central Asia,
1, 2, and 3
largely thanks to its vast wealth, energy, technology, large military, nuclear weapons, and seat on the powerful UN Security Council. But after the Soviet Union fell, many of these countries left that sphere by joining the NATO alliance and European Union. Ever since Vladimir Putin took power, he's been destabilizing and even invading countries who are considering doing the same. Iran's Islamic regime, meanwhile, has wanted to become the most powerful in the Middle East ever since it rose to power in 1979. It used oil wealth to fund militias and amassed thousands of missiles and drones in order to influence and threaten its neighbors. North Korea's first leader rose to power in the 1950s after a war split the Korean Peninsula.
Why don't they make a global NATO and everybody joins and nobody can invade anybody? A global
because
stalemate.
People don't
and since
want
then, he, his son,
America
and now his grandson have built a massive military and nuclear weapons arsenal that they threaten to use to conquer South Korea.
Oh, the UN! Oh, the UN! Dude, that's fantastic, dude. So whenever you start doing some shit and bombing a country, they do. Don't do that, man. Don't do
exactly.
that. Meanie.
Finally, the Chinese Communist Party has been vowing to take over Taiwan since it rose to power in the 1940s. It built itself into a superpower with vast wealth, a large military, nuclear weapons, and a seat on the UN Security Council. But it's expanded its ambitions to wield influence across all of Southeastern Asia. The second thing these four have in common is that the US has been thwarting their plans. It's been arming its allies to block these countries from expanding their influence, and they all hate it.
In many ways, the most powerful glue between those two countries is their shared animosity of the United States.
Andrea Kendall-Taylor is an expert on this new axis. Despite sharing an enemy, these four states weren't really all that close until the last decade or so, when the US began unleashing a powerful economic weapon.
Oh, because
you've probably seen bits and pieces of this story over the last couple of years. I've been following it for about a year now, and it's been made a lot easier thanks to my Ground News subscription. And I'm also super proud to have them on as a sponsor reporting on this Ground. In the last few decades, the US has been increasingly placing what's called sanctions on its enemies.
Sanctions are a tool that the United States regularly wields to push back against actions that other countries take, but that obviously fall well short of military measures.
Sanctions weaken America's enemies by basically blocking trade to that country until it stops doing what the US doesn't like. Sometimes the US alone refuses to trade with the country, but it often gets its allies or even the whole UN to also agree to stop trading with it. And that can prevent a country from getting things it really needs. To punish North Korea for its nuclear program, the UN has placed sanctions that have led to severe shortages of energy, technology.
Bro, North Korea is already like running out of shit. They probably don't have a lot of food, water, power, brother. And they're still making a bunch of bombs and shit like that. Like, how the fuck?
Yeah, because for different products you need different resources, and if they don't have food, well, you don't make bombs out of food,
while also preventing it from getting the
there's no correlation there.
Match its rivals in
You
the
can still
Middle
make
East.
bombs if they have
Sanctions are one of the key
uranium
reasons
or
why these
whatever they
states
use in
began to
bombs
work
nowadays,
together.
right?
Since the 1980s, Iran's been buying missiles from North Korea, and in the last decade,
I mean,
North
I'm pretty
Korea has
sure
been
you
buying
don't
Iranian
eat
oil.
fucking gunpowder.
China's also been buying Iranian oil and trading
Right,
with North
and
Korea,
bombs
which
don't run
use
on
as a
wheat.
troublesome but useful.
Am I wrong, Chad, that when they put sanctions, it's only the population that tanks? I feel like the rest of the garbage still stands pretty intact. It's just the population that tanks.
Ally.
Your daily person suffers, but above that.
And so by doing that, those people want to make sure they don't tank. They want to make sure they don't get sanctioned. And then you get a situation where the people there hate the political system, so they want to overthrow it.
Population are pretty significant. Putin is finished. He's doubled down on everything.
This guy is losing. Russia, I think, is literally running out of ammunition. They're seeking some support and some ammunition.
Russia has used up huge amounts of ammunition, weapons, and equipment in Ukraine, and sanctions placed by the US and its allies have made it difficult for it to replace them. Additionally, many Western countries have stopped buying Russia's oil.
Yeah, but hold on, chat. Guys, if these are friendly with the Iran and whatever, these guys don't have a lot of oil.
Iran
these
has
guys
a lot of oil.
sell oil, get money.
They have a lot
make
of oil.
the things and sell it back to Russia. It just changes.
Yeah, Russia has a
the
lot
trade,
of oil.
But it still remains pretty
Especially
much
since people aren't buying
leaving
it.
it also short of cash. Suddenly, Russia needs a lot of help, but very few countries are willing to give it any, except for 3. And it just so happens that Iran, North Korea, and China all have something it desperately needs. That's why I made these cards. Hopefully, they're an interesting way to show you what each country has to offer. Because at the very heart of this new axis are transactions. Russia convinced North Korea to begin sending it millions of rounds of ammunition and missiles. It also got Iran to send it missiles, plus thousands of drones.
Russia had to turn to these countries out of necessity. It is very consequential and important what Russia is getting, but just as important is what Russia is having to give away in return.
Russia has become Iran's largest source of foreign investment, and it's now sending Iran very advanced weaponry, like fighter jets and attack helicopters. Russia is also sending more food and energy to North Korea, plus advanced technology that it can use in its weapons. But neither state has helped Russia as much as China has. It's been buying lots of Russian oil, injecting
But how do they maintain such? Because the technology is impressive, sure, cool. I think maintain it is the hardest part. No, maintaining it, servicing it, storing it, all that. I mean, this becomes almost obsolete very quickly if they can't do it properly. No.
Billions of dollars into Russia's coffers. And it's sending Russia what's called dual-use products. Those are things that can be used for both commercial or military products. So while it's not accurate to say China is sending Russia weapons, many of these dual-use products are ending up in Russian weapons, like navigation equipment, jamming technology, jet fighter parts, and even drone parts. In exchange, Russia's been sending China more sophisticated technology, possibly for things like submarines and missile defense systems. By fulfilling each other's needs, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are able to survive despite being sanctioned, and all 4 are improving their ability to carve out spheres of influence. A win-win-win-win. Iranian drones and North Korean ammunition have helped Russia bog down Ukraine's counteroffensives, while Russian weapons have bolstered Iran's defenses. And its technology is believed to have helped North Korea build more advanced ICBM missiles. But while Russian technology and Iranian oil does help China, it's not involved in this axis to make trades.
There's certainly pragmatic, kind of tangible things that China is getting, but more than anything else, I think it is China wants to build a world that it thinks is more favorable to China, and in that pursuit,
that makes a lot more
Russia
sense.
is an extremely useful partner.
As China strives to become more powerful, the US is using its vast system of allies to contain it. So backing these states is a way for China to distract and threaten the US in more places. And it's even using its seat on the Security Council to thwart the US's agenda. It recently teamed up with Russia to block new sanctions on North Korea and block the US's call for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Could this axis survive without China?
I think it would just be far less impactful. It's the resources really that China brings to this that makes this axis of upheaval so concerning.
The concern is that China could use this axis to undermine the entire US-led world order, hence the axis of upheaval.
But when you think about what upheaval is,
Doesn't China have like a really massive like means of production, chat? Like the factories, and they can actually fucking make shit.
World order. Hence
That's
the axis of
That's one
upheaval.
of the biggest
But when you think
advantages.
about what upheaval is, it really is acts designed to overturn an existing order. And I think that's precisely what these 4 countries are trying to do. They're trying to overturn the rules, the norms, the institutions that have underpinned the world that we live in today.
China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea feel that those rules are being used to weaken them. So by teaming up, they could begin to build a new system based on how they want to rule.
They have that idea that there is no universal definition of democracy or human rights.
Chat, guys, what about like Japan and South Korea and all the mother suckers that are on the islands right there? Like, these mother suckers, I feel like if something was to go wrong, I mean, they will suffer pretty quickly, no? Like,
yes, but it could go either way.
Like
naval control is a big thing.
Blue thing, whatever, right?
Having these islands is a big thing.
These are weakened.
You can see it. Yeah, maybe they can fall, but what is that going to do?
There is no
They're not the core. The core of the alliance is
human
Europe
rights,
and
or the idea
Americas,
that
right?
No
So, and if they don't fall, then you can invade China
internal
immediately.
affairs of another state. Basically, code for the United
Right?
States can't
You can
push
just
democracy
invade
on human
China
rights in other countries
like that because you're
that's
already so
undermining
close.
to other autocracies.
The risk for the
You need
U.S.
to not
is
see
that
it
they
as
might
a
convince other-
liability, but as a way that they surround it, right? You see that they're a little blob in the middle, right? They're a blob in the middle. If a big world war would ensue, right? You can see that Central Asia, Mongolia will fall instantly, right? But if you surround them like this, you cut them out of the world order, right? Especially because you have these islands, you just cut them out of trade and all that.
autocracies who agree to join their axis. Perhaps even some states that are more neutral, creating a group large enough to compete with the U.S.-led.
Oh, Hong Kong is China. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Andrea believes that competition is already beginning to spark violence.
We had a flare-up in Armenia, Azerbaijan. Venezuela has threatened to take parts of Guyana by force. And certainly we have the conflict in the Middle East. And I worry very much that it is in large part because we are moving towards this world where it's not just the US-led order, but these 2 competing orders.
For now, this axis is far from being an alternative.
What I had meant is Taiwan. Taiwan has some of the stuff like some of the microchips
order
factories. Or is that
Yeah,
Hong Kong still? That's Taiwan.
They've been meeting each other more frequently and signing
not just
agreements,
Taiwan.
but they're not promising to defend each other. Nor have they all met at the same time.
And
But by even
Taiwan is
offering
an
a
island.
possible
It's difficult to
alternative
invade
the
an
US-led
island.
system, this axis is already putting more pressure on the U.S. to back its allies, like Taiwan, South Korea, Israel, and most urgently, Ukraine, which this axis would like to see defeated.
All of these countries would like to see Russia win in Ukraine, because then Russia has demonstrated to the rest of the world that might makes right, that you can change borders through the use of force, and the United States power, the power of its allies, can be defeated, it can be overcome.
And that the 4 of these states have figured out how to do it. So why not join them?
What?
All right. That's our episode for this week. I hope you enjoyed
Well,
it.
you don't join them.
We
It's
hit
because you get shut out of the
500,000
world
subscribers
order,
last
and
week.
if you get shut out, then you don't get to enjoy nice things like YouTube.
I think there's
Twitch,
a lot more nuance, but maybe
having
I think this
decent
is one of those
food
topics
and
like it's
other
kinda, always gonna be
either eating
oversimplified
weird
because there's a lot of
shit
historical
or
background that
trash.
makes it almost impossible to jam it all into like even a fucking 10-hour video. But
And you have less
like a-
censorship, maybe.
I don't know.
Less blatant. Well, you just have censorship on retardation, right? If you wanna say things that aren't retarded, well, you get censored. But at least you don't get censored for hating the government, because the government fucking sucks, right? Well, if you want to say things that isn't degenerate, or say that you dislike degenerate garbage or retarded garbage, well, then you get censored, of course. But, well, who doesn't like retardation and degeneracy, right?